about 25, you're invincible, and all of this stuff is just something that's happening in another world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Joe, you're not under 25 anymore?
Not lately. Hey, Herb.
I'm doing well. Glad to see you.
Josh, Ross, Benji.
How are we doing?
Clint, I've got something on my Zoom screen streaming live on YouTube. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, this will be live on YouTube.
I've got something on my Zoom screen streaming live on YouTube. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, this will be live on YouTube.
I've got something on my Zoom screen streaming live on YouTube. Is that correct?
In the feedback zone.
Yeah, we may need to start muting when this gets going.
Hey, Josh. I have my my performance review for work at 1 o'clock. Am I okay to step away at that time, or do I need to stay on for the duration of the meeting?
I think you should be safe to step away as long as we've got a quorum. Is that right?
Yeah, we're going to try to be wrapped up by 1 o'clock.
Okay, cool. I was just going in accordance with the duration of that the meeting had.
Benji, we know you're going to do a great job.
Oh yeah, we need to let all them in.
Hopefully, we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Ian, how you doing today?
Good, thank you.
They need to all be in the main.
You think we could get a ticker count to see how we're doing in terms of viewers compared to the congressional hearing with big tech?
We're going to test the limits today.
No, but y'all can hide you can hide the one.
Yeah, Jessica needs to be.
Hello. Good afternoon. This is Eddie Haas with Freeze and Nichols. How are you?
Yeah.
Can you guys see me?
No.
You know, I don't see my camera on.
Jessica?
No.
We should have sent them all panelists.
Yeah, you know what? We may need to be a panelist.
Just switch them to a panelist. Diane, pay attention to this.
Okay.
Where you just switch them to a panelist.
Promote. Oh, there we go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And
I
with
think-
more?
Just on the name.
Just a little more, okay.
Scott, how you doing, Scott?
Okay.
Yeah, we need to. Yeah, for sure, Eddie.
Can you see me now?
Yeah, we got you, Jessica.
Hey.
All right.
So everybody as a panelist?
Yeah, everybody can go to a panelist.
Even staff.
Uh-huh.
Dr. Vickers still on vacation.
Permanently.
But
I wish I was.
Disneyland?
It is. Yeah, I'm the only one here. It's great.
Cast of thousands.
So we got 10, 11. It's like we got 11,
Yeah, see.
11 members
I
right
don't know
now.
who these.
It's like the ones that are not on video and all stuff.
Okay.
Hide the non-video participants. Hide the non-video.
Josh, we have a quorum, so we're
I'm gonna go right here.
able to start whenever you're ready.
Okay, let me do a quick roll call. Is Scott Bland here?
He should be.
Scott Bland. Okay. Let's see. I thought I saw him
That's
on a video. Yeah. Okay. Josh Borderud, I'm here. Is Tara Briscoe here? Jed Cole, I think I saw Jed.
Here.
Jed is here. Ken Cooper, are you here?
Yes.
All right, welcome. Herb Cross, is Herb here?
Yes.
All right, welcome Herb.
Thank you.
Benji Gomez, are you here? All right, Benji is here. Pete Reitzinger, is Pete here? I see him.
Yes, I'm here with no video.
Okay, welcome Pete. All right, Ross Harris, I saw Ross. Ross is here. Ray Jefferson, is Ray here? Right, I don't think she's here. Kim Kazanis, I saw Kim. Kim is here. Joe Mayfield, Joe is here. Welcome, Joe. David Mercer, David is here. I think I see him. Yeah.
Yep.
All righty. Jason Ramos, Jason is here. Welcome, Jason. And Jeremy Vickers, I saw Dr. Vickers there. And Enid Wade, is Enid on the phone? I suppose not. Okay. With a quorum established, we will now call the meeting of the Capital Improvement Advisory Committee on July 29, 2020 to order at 12:04 in the PM. On March 16, 2020, the governor suspended various provisions of the Open Meetings Act pursuant to a state of disaster authority. The change was effective March 16, 2020 until further notice or until the state disaster declaration expires. In accordance with social distancing guidelines and while providing as much transparency as possible, the Waco Capital Improvement Advisory meeting will not be open to the public. This meeting is being streamed live at www.youtube.com/user/WCCC-TV/videos. The audio is being recorded and the recording will be available to the public. According to the Attorney General, governmental bodies must offer members of the public alternative methods of communication with their public officials. In an effort to allow for as much public input as possible, those who wish to speak on the agenda item were required to register with planning staff by 10 a.m. on July 29, 2020. We do not have any registered speakers today. Our agenda item today is discussion on impact fees, calculations for water, wastewater, and roadway impact fees. Mr. Peters, my understanding is you are going to introduce our consultants and take it from there.
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. We appreciate y'all being available for this meeting. I know it's a unique circumstances with the COVID and doing virtual, but we do appreciate everybody getting on. And this is I guess the part of the study that we've all been waiting for is the actual calculation of the fees. Those that y'all remember, we did hire a consultant to help us with the impact fee study that started a little over a year ago. And this commission and city council adopted the first two parts of the study, which were the land use assumptions or our future growth over the next 10 and 20 years. And then a CIP, capital improvement plan for infrastructure to serve that growth. And this advisory committee recommended that to city council and city council adopted it. And Fries and Nichols has been working with staff over the past 6 months or so and doing calculations of what the maximum fees can be. And that's what we're gonna do. They're gonna run through a presentation on how they calculated those fees, what they are, and then talk about some policy considerations that the advisory group will need to consider as we move forward to making recommendations to the city council on the impact fees. So we do have Jessica Vassar and Eddie Haas with Fries and Nichols. They're gonna go over, Jessica's gonna go over the water and wastewater portion of the fees. And then Eddie's going to go over the roadway portion of the fees and then talk about some of the policy considerations that we need to think about. So I'm gonna turn it over to Jessica. She's gonna start with water, wastewater, and then we'll pull up the PowerPoint so she can run through that. So we need
Right. I'm going to share my screen. All right. Can y'all see it? Wonderful.
I got it.
All right. Well, like Clint said, today we're going to talk about impact fees. And I know we do have a couple of new members here. So if anybody has any questions as we move through the presentation, don't hesitate to interrupt us or to ask questions. We're not going to ask you to make any final decisions today. That'll be at our next meeting. We'll be looking to make a recommendation to City Council. So today we're just going to present the information, talk a little about the numbers, but no action needs to be taken today. Look at our agenda. We're going to talk about the water wastewater impact fees first, then we'll talk about roadway, and then we'll get into some of our policy discussion. This is a reminder of the process we've been through. First thing we did was we developed our land use assumptions. We prepared a CIP for water, wastewater, and roadway based on those land use assumptions, put together a report, and that's already been through the first public hearing that is required under impact fees. And now we've done the impact fee calculations to calculate the maximum allowable impact fee. And we've submitted a draft report, and then we're coming up to our second public hearing. We're looking at that for the end of September, where we will present the impact fee calculations to council for their consideration and adoption of an impact fee ordinance. Eddie, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to, for the new members on the committee, thank you for being a part of the team. This process has been going on for a little while now, and we're culminating with a lot of technical numbers. Today, we're going to be telling you how we're deriving the cost per service unit and kind of start rolling out some of the thinking that you all are going to be needing to do in terms of what kind of recommendation might you roll over to council as part of your final act. And that's a letter to council on the potential imposition of impact fees. So at the base level, an impact fee is just a finance tool. It's a finance tool for helping to address the cost of future infrastructure. Waco is going to grow by 18,000 people over the next 10 years. It's going to create a demand on roads, water, and wastewater systems. We have looked at those growth needs. We've developed a capital improvements plan. Ultimately, it boils down to this infrastructure is going to cost some money. And the question is, who's going to pay for it? At the base level, you have your tax base that picks it up, or with this impact fee program, you have new development picking up a portion of that cost. That's what we're ultimately getting to, is if there is a desire by council to implement impact fees, what portion of that cost associated with impact of new applications, new residential, new office on the system in new development, at least the philosophical approach is new development should help pay for a portion of that cost. And that's what this is all about. So it's a finance tool. Okay, Jessica, there you go.
All right, thanks, Eddie. So looking at the water wastewater impact fees, as a reminder, our service area for water wastewater is the ETJ, and we do have the same service area for both water and wastewater. And using our land use assumptions that we've seen previously, we use that to put together a water CIP that we see on this slide. And we've seen this information before, and this was developed with the assistance of staff and based on other studies that the city has conducted. So this is a map showing all of our water impact fee CIP projects. And this includes a combination of projects that are already on the ground that still have capacity to serve growth, and proposed projects that are yet to be built but have capacity to serve growth over the next 10 years. And the reason this is important is because impact fees are looking out at a 10-year window. And I don't want to go through every number on this slide. I know I've got a lot of information here, but what I want to show you here is that we went through each of the projects that we identified for our CIP, and we determined what portion of those projects is serving existing customers and what portion will be serving customers over the next 10 years. So in this example, W1, we see that 50% of the capacity of that project is serving customers that already live in Waco. So we can't count that 50% towards impact fees. And we estimate that by 2030, 75% of that project will be used. So there's still an additional 25% that's available beyond the 10-year window. And if you subtract our 2020 number from our 2030 number, that comes up with a 25% utilization over the next 10 years. And so you multiply that by your capital cost, and that means that the eligible portion of this project, Project W1, is about $3 million. So we're over here in the far right column, and you take all of the projects, we went through each of them individually. We talked with staff to make sure everybody was comfortable with our utilizations. You get down here to the bottom, and on water, we've got $34 million of eligible CIP cost. And you'll see that number again later when we get to our calculations. Does anyone have any questions about how we derive that information? Okay, moving on to wastewater. This is the same situation. We have our wastewater CIP where we've got all of our proposed and existing wastewater projects laid out on this map. And we've seen this information before, so we're not going to go through each project individually. And we did the same exercise on wastewater where we looked at what is the 10-year utilization. And on wastewater, if you come down to the bottom here, you see that our eligible CIP cost is about, call it $64 million. For water and wastewater, our service unit equivalent is a water meter, and our service unit is a water meter. So single family homes in Waco are served by a 5/8 inch meter. And what we want to do is we want to determine the service unit equivalents for all of the larger meters in your system. And so AWWA, the American Water Works Association, says that a 5/8 inch meter can pass 15 gallons per minute, or GPM. So that's what we're seeing here, is that this 5/8 inch meter is passing 15 GPM. And if you come down here to the 4-inch meter, AWWA says that it can safely pass 630 gallons per minute. So it is 42 times the amount of flow of a 5/8 inch meter. And what this means is that it's a service unit equivalent of 42, but also this means that, you know, depending on how you adopt your ordinance, that a development that would require a 4-inch meter would pay 42 times the impact fee of a single family home. And you'll see how that calculation plays out when we're looking through some of our sample calculations. Any questions on this?
I got a question.
Yeah, great.
Hey, there are a lot of 1-inch meters in the system, but more importantly, there are a lot of irrigation only meters in the system. How you deal with it? And they're the big users. How do you deal with that?
So what you'll see on this next slide is we do have a count of all the different meter sizes of how many there are currently in the system. And so we use that information when we're looking at how many meters. We use the actual number of meters that are already in the system. And if a development comes in and they need more than 1 meter, they would probably pay the impact fee on both meter sizes that they would have at their house. So if they have a 5/8 inch meter for their house and a 1-inch meter for their lawn, they'd pay the impact fee on both of those, unless the ordinance is written differently. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. So looking at this slide, like I was saying, in 2020, this is the number of meters of all the different sizes that you currently have on your water distribution system. And we took that information with the service unit equivalents from the previous slide, and we multiplied it by the number of meters that you have to come up with how many service units you have in 2020. And then using the land use assumptions that we've already adopted, we use that to project how many additional meters you'll have of each size in 2030. And again, did the conversion to service units. And then the important thing here is our growth in service units. This is our growth in service units over the next 10 years. So you take your 2030 service units and you subtract your 2020 service units, and that gives you the growth over the next 10 years. We come down here and we see that our growth over the next 10 years is 12,753 service units. And I've been kind of talking about a lot about this calculation we're going to get to, and this is kind of where the rubber meets the road. This is the impact fee equation. So we have our eligible CIP cost as our numerator, and Chapter 395 of the Texas Local Government Code says that we have to award a 50% credit. So immediately right off the top, we'll take our CIP cost and then we'll take a 50% credit that's required by Chapter 395. And then we're going to divide by our growth in service units. So that's 12,753 is going to be our denominator of our equation. And this is the calculation. So let's go through the example for water. So we have the $34 million that we saw earlier. We take immediately the 50% credit. So that's row 2 is the eligible cost divided by 2. Then we have our financing costs, because impact fees under Chapter 395, we are allowed to include the financing costs. So rows 3 and 4 are the financing costs that we've calculated. And then you add all of that up in row 5. And that's the total. So that's going to be the numerator. And then our denominator of our equation are growth in service units, 12,753. And it comes down on water. We have got $1,804 as our maximum. And I've got the window over wastewater. There we go. Wastewater is 3,574 for the maximum allowable. So what this means is this, on the water wastewater side, this is the cost for a single family home for a 5/8 inch meter. And council can elect to set anywhere from $0 up to this amount that we see in row 7. And your job as the advisory committee will be to make a recommendation on what you think council should set this at. So that's something to be thinking about as we get into the policy discussion. Any other questions on water wastewater?
How did you come up with the financing costs?
We had Nugent, who's a financial firm, do the financial analysis for us. And I have a lot of really detailed sheets that I could, if we need to get into those details, but Nugent also does the rate studies for the city of Waco, and they did that calculation for us.
Is that based on the 10-year?
Yes, that is based on the 10-year financing cost of these projects. And the credit that you see is based on any interest that we would be earning on this money that we're collecting through the impact fee program. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, all right. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Eddie to talk about roadway. Eddie, you're muted.
There we go. Nugent is one of the financial consultants that's on our team. If there's questions on the derivation of that or the process, how that, if it's bonds or how that's sold, we can bring them into the next meeting and they can answer any specific questions you have. But as Jessica mentioned, it is very detailed. The roadway component is a little more technical. And let's see if I want to advance my screen, Jessica. Okay, am I doing it? Are you doing it or am I?
Right now, I'm doing it. Do you want to see if you can get control? Can you request it? It's a new program here using the YouTube channel, so we're all figuring this out.
Okay, I think I got it. If not, Jessica, you could help me out. So roads is a little different from the water wastewater. As Jessica talked about, you have a full system. Whoa.
I'm doing great. How about you?
Okay. You've got a full system of improvements that's a closed system of improvements, if you will, and then as future growth comes in, as that portion of cost that's then allocated to that future growth for the cost per service unit calculation. Roads, we're dealing with an open system of improvements, right? Traffic is already out there, people are cutting through town, going to and from and everywhere. Further, with the impact fee stipulation, that service areas can't be greater than 6 miles within the current city limits. The theory is that, can you see my cursor there on screen? The theory is that if development is occurring here, say in service area 7.
Eddie, try to take control again.
All I have is give up control.
Take it back one more time.
All right. Request.
Approve.
Click to start. Click to start the.
There you go.
Got it?
Yep.
All right. So if new growth, say, is occurring here in service area 11, and fees are collected in this zone, we don't want those monies being spent on projects in service area 9. So the notion is, as new developments occurring in certain part of town, monies that are collected from new development should go to projects within the vicinity. So the law stipulates that that service areas can't be greater than 6 miles. So what we've done is we've divided the community up into service zones. There's 11 of them. Some look kind of oddly shaped. But the thought process was that, within the ETJ, or if one day annexation does occur or voluntarily, areas that are annexed into the city are annexed into certain service areas.
Hang on
So
one minute. Let me give you a little tip here. You bet.
Hey, Pete Greitzinger, this is Josh Borderer.
Thank
You
you.
might need to mute your phone. You might need to mute. Hey, Pete, can you hear me? Can we mute Pete Greitzinger as a courtesy?
okay, we'll keep going there. So we've got 11 service areas that have been kind of thought long process, and there are generally the shapes will ultimately be about the same generally. But the key point is that service zones, the fees collected must be spent on projects within those service areas. All right, process wise, you know, we're doing it a little bit different from the water wastewater. We're identifying capital projects that are needed to cover growth. And then bottom line, from the cost of those capital projects, we're deriving the cost per service unit to provide capacity of roadway projects, okay? So we start, the process starts with the thoroughfare plan. We're using the regional thoroughfare plan from the Waco Comprehensive Plan 2040. From the 10-year forecast, that's based on the land use assumptions, how we see Waco growing over the next 10 years. We looked at both population and employment, and we're able to quantify 10-year service units of demand. The service unit for roads is vehicle miles. You might recall that from our last conversation. And then reviewing the thoroughfare plan and what are the needs, not only over the 10-year, but you know, what are the needs potentially longer term? We identified a list of projects that we vetted with the MPO, we vetted with staff. We reviewed those projects with the development committee back in December. And then we kind of made the final decision on those list of projects. Those were then ultimately approved as part of the land use assumptions and capital improvements plan, that public hearing that was held in March. The biggest item though is project achievability. We're identifying projects that we think are needed over the 10 years, not projects that are going to be pie in the sky. Okay, so boy, this is just a little touchy here. The slide that flew by was, there it is. This is kind of a summation of land use assumptions, or in other words, future growth, how that translates to vehicle miles. What we have categorically is the future population in terms of residential growth, and then we have the employment growth in terms of basic service retail. The kind of the notion is traffic is being generated differently for industrial type development versus retail. Service is kind of office. So there's different traffic characteristics for those categories, and so that's why we break it out. More importantly, it's broken out by service area. So we have a total in the far right column, that's the number of VMT, or the vehicle miles that's going to be generated over 10 years by service area. System wide, we're generating a little over about 49,000 vehicle miles of demand in the 10-year window. With that in mind, we went through the process of identifying projects, and through that vetting process, this is what we ultimately wound up with. And these projects have been identified. We've got about 42 project segments on the list. The projects are quantified, cost allocated or derived by service area. So projects that straddle a service area line, like a portion of Golson here. That means a portion of this small segment of this Golson project between the loop down to MLK, not MLK, but to the end of the project would be split between service area 1 and service area 6. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Bottom line, these are the projects that we identified. They're kind of color coded. This is all new capacity that we're considering for long-term growth. Okay. All right. So project costing. Once we identified the projects, we went through a detailed process of preparing cost estimates that broke down in terms of construction, engineering, and right-of-way. We worked with another one of our sub-consultant team members, Walker Partners, to review those cost estimates. And basically, what we're saying here in the costing is these are the costs to put these facilities on the ground. We were very careful not to add contingencies. The reason for that is as projects are developed, then the actual numbers need to come into the database. By service area, if there's a difference of greater than 10% in the next update, there could be the potential of a refund. We don't want that to happen. So we have a conservative approach, if you will, in terms of the cost estimates itself. Engineering is about 9% of construction. Right-of-way, we estimated conservatively about $1 a square foot, $43,560 an acre. Okay. The overall program, just by overall citywide, the overall program is about $62 million. We have spreadsheets that total each one of the capital costs, engineering, right-of-way by service area, just to give you the big picture of the overall program. $62.8 million, construction being 55.5 of that, engineering at about 5 million, and then a right-of-way at about 2.2 million. That right-of-way is the needed or the additional right-of-way to get to ultimate thoroughfare standard. If right-of-way is 60 foot that's out there now, the thoroughfare plan has 90 feet, then it's just that delta that was being considered for the right-of-way costs. Okay, so we're kind of jumping forward to the actual costs, and what I'm showing here are 2 service areas only. We have 11 different calculations. They're all done individually, if you will. But in service area 1, you might recall in the map there was only that small piece of that one project, Golson. The project cost of that is $205,000. Based on the remaining or the excess capacity, in other words, capacity that might be chewing away at some of that, we have about $66,000 of that can be recoverable over the 10-year window. From the financial subconsultants, they quantified the debt service, removed any interest earnings from debt service. So of the 204,000, the portion that can be considered is about 102,000. So that includes that 50% credit. So this would represent the ceiling on a cost per service unit basis that we could consider, and that's $6. $102,000 divided by 15,947 vehicle miles of demand on a cost per service unit basis per vehicle mile, it's $6 a service unit. That's not the ultimate fee. We'll talk about that in a minute. Similarly, in service area 2, we had a few more projects in there, $4.3 million, 50% credit, finance cost, portion attributable to future growth, 3.2 million, 10-year VMT, 4,600. Cost per service unit is $697. The reason I'm pointing this out is there's going to be some nuances that we'll want to be considering from a policy perspective because we're dealing with 11 different resultant costs. Okay, this next table here, along with kind of the graphic, the image to remind you where the service areas were, this is the bottom line cost per service unit for each one of these service areas, ranging anywhere. Sorry?
Can I jump in really fast? I just
Yes,
want to
ma'am.
point out that on this table, if anyone's following along doing the math, this row 2, it's the 50% credit, but it also is the percent that's attributable to growth. So it's not just the direct 50%, just in case anyone's watching that math and thinking it's the percent attributable to growth and the 50% credit in one row.
That's, yeah, good clarification there, Jay.
I just wanted to make sure nobody was going to be confused.
Thank you. Okay. So we have the cost per service unit, the derived straight technical calculation that results anywhere from $6 a service unit to $1,300 a service unit in service area 10. Service areas 5 and 8 were 0 because there were no projects in either one of these service areas. Okay, so this represents the unit cost to put road on the ground. This is future capacity of those projects that were identified on that CIP. Okay. What we've done is wanted to graphically show this to you, just to kind of start getting your mind thinking about, oh boy, we're dealing now with multiple service areas here. So what we've got is we've got the set of the service areas that are along the bottom. There's the 11 service areas. What we're highlighting are 2 things. One, in the orange, is the actual cost per vehicle mile, and in blue is that credited cost. Okay. So this takes into account the cost attributable to growth, the 50% credit, et cetera. So while in service area 2, the number came out to $697 per vehicle mile, we need to recall that the actual cost of putting road on the ground is $1,300, almost $1,400 per vehicle mile. Who's picking up that delta? That's going to be your tax base. Okay. Blue, depending on if impact fees are imposed and the collection rate, that would be a share of future development picking up that share. In service area 2, that the collection rate could be anywhere from 0 to $697. All right, we're dealing with multiple service areas, so each one is calculated differently. Service area 1, because we only had one portion of a small project, that's $6. Service area 2, $697. Service area 3, $12.94, and so on. What that means is, if for example, the decision were to make, let's collect $6.97 per service unit, just for discussion purposes. That would mean in service area 1, it would be $6. In service area 2, it would be $6.97. In service areas 3, 7, 10, and 11, it would be capped at $6.97. That's if the decision was, let's find something that's kind of in between or in the middle of all these service areas, okay? Service area 4, that number would be $2.59, $2.36, and $6.18 and 9. So in other words, that's the maximum you can collect. We can't go above that, and it's below that threshold. So this is just for discussion purposes, and it's going to be important that you start understanding this because of the multiple number of service areas we're dealing with. Okay, and I just picked service area 2, just picked only because there were 4 that were above and there were 4 that were below. So it's kind of down the road, down the middle, if you will. So that relates to the cost per service unit. That's the cost per vehicle mile. That doesn't mean it's the impact fee. Different land uses generate traffic, have different travel characteristics based on size of land use, intensity of land use. Think of a residential subdivision, 250 homes versus a 50,000 square foot shopping center. You can see the differences in traffic. So what we have is a land use equivalency table that's broken out into 5 major categories: residential, office, commercial, industrial, and institutional. Within there's divisions for subcategories. But the important thing is, for each one of these, we've calculated the service unit generation. And I know this table is hard to read, but we've calculated the service unit generation for each type of land use based on an independent variable of per dwelling unit or on a per 1,000 square foot basis. It's tailored to Waco. So we have, to get to that vehicle mile as the service unit, we have trip rate information and we have trip length information that then that summarizes into that ultimate cost per service unit. This is a blow up of the top half of the equivalency table. Here's the category. You can see some of the subcategories: single family, detached housing, multifamily, senior adult housing. Here's the independent variable. Here's the trip rate. Here's our adjusted trip length, and here's our service unit equivalency. So what this is saying here in the case of single family is one single family dwelling unit generates a demand of 3.2 vehicle miles of demand. Okay. 1,000 square feet of office generates 4.95 vehicle miles of demand. Okay. It's important that I bring this to you because for the impact fee calculation for roads, it's a 2-step process. Developer comes in, city's going to say, okay, what's the size of development, the number of service units that are being, the type of development, the service unit generation, and how many vehicle miles are being generated by the site. Then in step 2, based on the number of vehicle miles generated by the site, and a policy decision on what cost per service unit to collect, that becomes your impact fee. Jessica had the easy road. She had the service unit or the meter of 1. So we know the cost per meter is $1,804 for water and $3,900 for wastewater. So for one resident, it makes it easier. And I'll walk you through that calculation here. Here's an example. New development located in service area 2. And in this case, we're going to say it's a single family residence. With a collection rate of $6.97. That just for discussion purposes. This is that one that was middle of the road, right? In between those 11 service areas. If the desire was to collect $6.97 per vehicle mile for roads, collect $1,804 for water, or $35.74 for wastewater, this is how the ultimate impact fee would calculate. For roads, one dwelling unit times the impact fee per service unit. One single family residence would be an impact fee of $2,230. For water, the impact fee is $1,804, wastewater $3,507, totaling $7,608 as the impact fee for one single family residence. It's important that we have this unit cost basis or this unit basis because development application may be 50,000 square feet of grocery store, 100,000 square feet of industrial, any variety of land uses could come in. Staff has to have the ability to generate what's that impact. Roads, it's a little more complicated. We'll have a cost calculator that's going to kind of summarize all this stuff up. We're in pull down menus where you can quickly calculate that fee. Okay. Any questions on the road piece and how the cost per service unit was derived and how that's used for calculating a fee?
I have I guess what would be a philosophical question.
Yes, ma'am.
And if we're looking at the roadway service areas, I'm specifically thinking of what looks like about the service area 10 and 11,
Mhm.
specifically 10. How do you approach or explain regionalism, in these decisions on roadways? Like you
Right.
talked about it not being a closed system. We've got potentially 3 municipalities butted up against these areas. So Hewitt, Woodway, potentially McGregor, which,
Mm, yeah.
do impact fees draw development away from the city of Waco, but place it within Woodway, where our infrastructure is equally stressed, but there's no impact fees collected?
Yeah, so we got to kind of turn that around. If Waco implements the impact fee program and new Starbucks or a new HEB comes in here, service area 10, it's going to generate traffic. But these other communities that are here, that's just impact that chews away at the capacity being provided. That gets lost in the system. That gets netted out of the calculation. So that they're not subject to the fee. Only new development within Waco would be subject to the fee. Okay. So, and it's just the fact roads are open. Anyone can use them. And so as development occurs, they're paying for that actual impact that development's generating. Okay, yeah, I know where you're going to go. All right, well, heck, let's not go to Waco. Let's go on this side where it's free and put our development over here. Well, yep, true, you can do that. But if new development occurs in here, they're generating an impact that we've quantified the impact on the system, and on it, we've quantified it to a unit cost basis. We can make that determination. So yeah, Woodway and McGregor or all these other communities, they're getting a benefit, and they're not paying a share of that. Maybe there ought to be a different discussion.
Eddie, are there not ETJ roadway impact fees though?
No, the law is very specific. 395 says city limits, development within the city limits. Yeah.
Or roadway.
For roads only. Jessica's went into the ETJ because by law she's allowed to go to a service area, and that service area can be ETJ or CCN. In this case, it's ETJ.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're right. Development may get parked right outside here. They're not subject to the fee. The hope is that they want the benefit of city services. That maybe there's an annexation agreement or developer agreement that they come into the city. If they put in improvements, they get some credits from those improvements that apply toward the impact fee.
Expand the territory, and then you have a larger service area.
That's correct. Larger service area. I hear you.
This is Jeremy Vickers here. Question for you, and this maybe Jessica as well. But when you're calculating your primary growth rate between 2020 and 2030, which really impacts the entire model significantly and really drives the impact fee at the bottom line, has that model evolved in the last few months with everything that's been going on? Is it was it developed prior using the same across standard? Is it built on a 5-year average? Waco's kind of gone through a growth rate, but we don't necessarily always know if that's going to stagnate. And where do you build that from?
Yeah, so that was building block 1 right out of the chute. From our very first meeting, we met with the advisory committee and looking at how has Waco grown historically within 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, 10 years. They looked at permit data, they looked at meter connections, they looked at all kinds of things to determine a compound annual growth rate that was approved. And Jessica, I don't recall what that growth rate was. 1.25%. So based on that 1.25, then the process was, where is that growth going to occur? So we worked with staff on, okay, what's known development occurring? Where are new things happening to help allocate that growth, if you will? Okay, so there's a detailed land use assumptions report. That was the one that was part of the March public hearing, March 3rd, March 6th, somewhere in there. And that was 14th. Part of the, okay, yeah, 13th, thank you. And so that report's available to see all those details. But you're right. That becomes the driving factor in the cost per service unit. And what it does is it is our our crystal ball on where we see growth occurring over the next 10 years, if you will. But it's also rooted in what's been going on in the past. Now, there's two safeguards here. Number one, by law, we have to review this impact fee program at least every 5 years. Okay, so if Waco hums along at 1.25%, that's fine. But if all of a sudden things really happen in Waco, center of the universe, and growth just goes through the ceiling, it can trigger, per the advisory committee recommendation, hey, I think we need to take a look at it, land use assumptions again, and take a look at this cost per service unit for the impact fee program. It can be in year 2, it can be in year 4, whenever, but by law, at least every 5 years. Since we're looking at a 10-year window, we know there's going to be cycles. Some will be growing fast, others may be down. That's why we have this calculator rate, which builds into effect some of these dips. We don't know what the future is going to be, but we have the advantage that we're going to be looking at it 5 years or sooner. The other thing is that we're breaking this thing down into a unit cost basis. And so let's say in the case of in any one of these components, if the desire is not to collect greater than, well, we're not collecting greater than 50%, but if we don't collect at least 50%, well, that means we have some flexibility, that we're not collecting the maximum that could be collected. That means the tax base is picking that up, okay? So, I don't know if that, does it, Jeremy, does that help to answer your question?
Perfect. Yeah, thank
Okay.
you. I appreciate it.
Any other questions on roads? Okay, now we're really gonna have some fun here. We're gonna go to next steps. So next steps is where we're going with this. There's a lot of technical that gets us to this point in terms of the cost per service unit. From there, we got to start thinking about what do we want to collect? We know the ceiling that we can collect is up to 50% for each one of these infrastructure components. And then for roads, we have that calculated by service area. So we're gonna have to start thinking about, do we want a uniform fee across the board? Do we want to have any variation? Do we want to collect water and wastewater at 50%, at roads 10% where possible? Do we want to break out a residential versus a non-residential rate? Some communities have done that, and impact fees are now pretty common across the state, even in areas where they weren't so prevalent in the past. West Texas and Southeast, they're now being considered. But so that all these become policy considerations: residential, non-resident, or special considerations. Maybe we start low, slowly ramp it up. Year 1, we have a fee. Year 2, we bump it up by 5%. Year 5, the new study comes into play, and another set of considerations. Maybe we adjust the effective date. Yeah, we implement the program in December of 2020, but we want the effective fee to start in summer of 21. Maybe there are specific target area strategies, thinking about economic growth and those kinds of things. Grandfathering of plats that are already in the pipe, or plats that had previous platting, but the final platting hasn't come in. There's a range of policies that can be considered. We're going to kind of ask you all to kind of keep it simple in terms of what should we do by way of collection. But that doesn't mean that some of these others can't be considered, okay? So your final charge as the advisory committee will be in the form of a letter saying, 1, do you accept the reports, the technical derivation of that cost? And then a recommendation, council, we think you ought to consider imposing the impact fee program. And if you do decide to do it, here's what we think you ought to consider as the collection rate. Then council will take that under advisement during that public hearing process, okay? Just kind of laying out the framework here, okay? All right, gonna go back, let's take a step back now. Remember how in the roads piece, we were talking about, all right, what's the cost? What's the impact fee for that service area 2? Remember we went to that example, it was $22.30. Here's that one where we've assumed, just for discussion purposes, the $6.97 in service area 2 was going to be the controlling fee. That means in service area 1, service area 4, 6, and 9, they are going to be at whatever they're going to be. That would be at their maximum. Service area 2 would be capped at $22.30, although it could be at the 50% rate, $41.40. Could be $42.30 in service area 10 or $37.40 in 11. But if the decision is, well, let's find something that's in the middle of the road or lower or whatever, then that means well, this will be the fee, but that means on this side, that means it becomes a subsidy that the tax base picks up that delta, right? We're already picking up the above part, greater than 50% here in service area 3. But if you decided that that's $697 per service unit was the way to go, well, that means this delta here of what, $2,000, $1,900, well, that becomes tax base helping to pick that up. That's just the road piece here. I want to show you here, what is the impact fee for one single family residence considering all of the infrastructure components. So here we have the 11 service areas. We have roads highlighted in orange. Blue is the water, green is the wastewater. Okay, so in service area 1, if we were to say we're going to collect 50% across the board, whatever that number is, that's what it's going to be. Service area 1, one single family residence is $5,399. Service area 7, it's $7,609. Service area 8, it's $5,380. So you can see the math there. Okay, so you can see the kind of thinking, the policy consideration we're going to be thinking about. Is there any desire to say, well, if I'm in service area 2 and it's a little bit lower than service area 3, you know, someone's going to say, well, heck, I don't want to develop in service area 3 because it's cheaper if I go in service area 2, you know, or something. And that's why there's some, if there's some thought process desired, maybe trying to level those out a little bit. But you have to always keep in mind about who's going to pay for this stuff. Okay. So to help the discussion process as we move forward, you know, in this graph just kind of helps to show where that, in this case, one single family residence, what that fee would be by location. Okay. Okay. A lot of other communities across the state have impact fee programs. That's going to be another consideration. Where does Waco want to be relative to other communities that have impact fee programs? Here, what we call on the benchmarking slide is the cost of the impact fee of one single family residence. That assumption was for Waco service area 2, that across the board. But where might one cost for a single family residence be in Denton? Well, that impact fee in Denton is $12,000. These are numbers that by ordinance, we looked them up. This is what it would cost if you put a single family home in Denton, $12,000. Georgetown, it's about what, 11,200. Round Rock, about say 9,500. Here's Waco, that kind of that average or in the middle of the road there. Service area 2, 7,800. Fort Worth, a little over 6,000. College Station, Arlington. Okay, that is if you wanted to consider what are other communities collecting. We could have a whole string of cities, but we just kind of honed in on a handful here. These communities all have university, so we thought let's think about metropolitan areas, larger communities that have a university as part of their community. This is something that might help in the thought process of, well, what should Waco collect? Now, we've only painted the picture here of one single family residence. So we wanted to kind of help really spin things up with other land uses. Okay. So in that same scenario, if we collected the 50% for water and wastewater in Waco, and we collected that $697 per service unit, that's kind of that across the board, we're saying service area 2, what would the cost of a hotel be? And in this scenario, this is about 125 rooms. This is like Holiday Inn Express, some of these newer, the Indigo, those kind of hotels. This is what an impact fee for a hotel would be of that size. If you went with that scenario we painted in Waco, it could be a little over 200,000. In Fort Worth, that impact fee is what, 140,000, 150. In Arlington, it's about 140,000. In College Station, it's 60,000, somewhere in there. So that starts the thinking, well, do we want to have residential versus non-residential? Do we want to be one of the higher ones? All within the backdrop of, if we don't ask development to chip in, then our tax base picks it up. Okay, so we're just painting these scenarios. Here's another one. Here's a grocery store. This is 50,000 square foot grocery store, say a Tom Thumb, you know, any of the newer ones that are out there. Again, that same service area 2 scenario for Waco, but 50,000 square foot grocery store in Round Rock, it's going to cost you almost $500,000. In Denton, that's a little over $300,000. In Waco, that's $120,000. College Station, 75. Georgetown, looks like 50, but I don't see the road, unless the road piece is very low, we just don't see it.
Georgetown, I don't think has adopted their roadway impact fee. They're studying it, but I don't believe it's been
Okay.
adopted.
Then that's for sure. They are certainly considering it because I've seen it. So, okay, I wasn't sure where they were in that. Thank you, Jessica. And then here's another scenario. It's 200,000 square foot of light industrial. This could be distribution, high tech kind of stuff. That same scenario within Waco Service Area 2. 200,000 square feet of light industrial is an impact fee of $410,000. Similar in Round Rock and Denton. Fort Worth, it's a little over $300,000. Arlington, 150, and so on. Okay. One last
Can
one
I ask
here.
a question?
Yes, sir.
When I'm looking at these, my first impression is those are high numbers for new businesses that were actually to come in here and take a risk on, bringing in jobs and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really, I'm kind of going, wow, that how can those pay off?
Right.
Or how long does it take to get that money back, recoup that?
Sure.
And maybe some of you guys here on this panel could answer that for me, but I'd really be surprised if all of a sudden Waco jumps up to the high end of all of these numbers, and I think it'd be like turning the faucet off.
True.
Yeah,
So
again, that's the input we need, because what we're showing is the maximum we could charge with the fee.
Right, I understand that, but I'm just, that's my take initially is, how in the world does a business owner that's wanting to put a new hotel in here, and I realize we've had a lot of them come in here recently, but if they now have a $400,000 hickey on top of all of that, would they be thinking, well, maybe I need to just move over here into the Woodway area or out to Lorena or whatever,
Ken, that's a
Yeah,
really good.
I agree with Ken. You're reading those numbers. I got the same reaction Ken does. This just seems like it's going to kill development in Waco.
Yeah, I feel like it's certainly a challenge for us. We would want to use it to incentivize or disincentivize growth, right? In certain areas, and that requires a very strategic effort connected with economic development and other factors. What strikes me, I think, is I look at College Station in a lot of ways as a peer city in our state. Different reasons, right? But why is it on such a regular basis? I think now we've seen 4 or 5 different examples. They are so significantly lower. Was it the time? Was it the number of years ago in which they they did their study and assessed their fees? What are the factors there with them? Because they've gone through a pretty somewhat similar growth pattern as us with different factors in a similar size community.
Their impact fee program was adopted about 2 years ago.
Okay.
And in our next meeting, we're going to have some more information on what percentage of max is College Station collecting.
That would be helpful.
That way you'll kind of apples to apples.
It sounds like they're probably taking a lower percentage based on what we're seeing here.
Well,
Definitely.
That's
and you
their
can tell
unit
because they've
right.
got these really nice round numbers that they said, okay, for a single family home, $3,000 for wastewater, $500 for water, $1,500 for roadway. So they've obviously not adopted the maximum.
So
I got to spend a lot of time. Down there this last year in the Bryan College Station area, and they are about 10 years behind where we are in terms of the city of Bryan, their downtown development. So they're coming in behind us as far as where we are in terms of redevelopment our city core.
So, and that was a great comment. Both comments are great. The thought process that we need to be thinking about is, that's going to impact new development. It might run it off. But if HEB comes or 200,000 square foot of light industrial comes, that's going to create an impact on the infrastructure system that if there's no finance mechanism to ask them to help chip in a portion of that cost, who's going to pick that up? So that's where it goes. Okay. I came back to the single family slide because that's one dwelling unit. So let's just say it's 250 dwelling unit residential subdivision, right? Because it's not going to be, and well, there could be singles, but you'll have bigger one. So 250 dwelling unit subdivision is about 187,000 impact fee. That's for residential. Okay. I think we did one other one. It was 200,000 square feet of heavy industrial. This would be manufacturing, bigger, heavier type activity going on. And this is that same scenario. What might an impact fee be if in Waco? A little over 525,000 in Waco. Here you've got Fort Worth, Round Rock, and Denton, little over anywhere from 320 to 375,000. Georgetown, Arlington, College Station at the lower end. So obviously you're on it. These are some kinds of things that we want to consider, you know, on what we should ask new development to chip in. I bring back this slide that we had before. You know, do we want a uniform fee across the board? In other words, do we want residential to be, you know, $697 per unit here, or the fee here is the same in service area 1 or 9 where possible? Or do we want that 10% of whatever that number is, and so it'll be different in service areas? We want to try to take that out, that the argument of, well, it's more expensive to go in 7 versus 6. I'll just go to 6. I want to try to level that out. So, you know, we might want to think about that. Do we want to have residential versus non-residential, or any of these other special considerations? Okay.
Eddie, can I ask you another question on
You bet.
this? And it may not be a simple calculation, but what would help me and perhaps the others on this call as we look at another round of information is, and I'm thinking about the single family home example of, you know, call it 7,000 or so and change.
Sure.
You know, if our average new single family home is X, right? Pick a number, $250,000. Then we can calculate the percentage, the incremental percentage cost, and that probably helps us digest that how the fee is impacting the individual builder or commercial owner. Is it possible to look at some averages across these 4 or 5 examples and apply those numbers and help us understand what that incremental cost would be if a 200,000 square foot light industrial is going to be a $2 million project? Well, it's going to be more than that, but you know, a $20 million project. I'm trying to do the math in my head here.
Yeah.
And you know, we're adding $500,000. Well, as a percentage, that's going to look a little different than $7,000 on a $100,000 house, right? So, and then I don't know if it's possible to apply that across our the cities that you've done examples of as well, because that'll help us understand what level of fee they're assessing even on a relative basis, because I know the cost of building and the cost of living in Round Rock is going to be a little bit higher than it is here, or College Station might be better. Are some of those things a part of the data you could provide to help us make the decisions on fees and percentage?
We'll be able to maybe get some of the data. I don't think we'll be able to get all of it. We'll need to lean on planning staff for what's the cost of some of these types of developments in Waco. We could do maybe some research, but I don't know that we can get it all. So if we could maybe pick 1 or 2 scenarios where we could maybe try to do that.
Yeah, I defer to the group on.
We can work on that with our local partners, the Home Builders Association and our chamber, to get some of those project numbers and running some scenarios with that. I would mention, and I do apologize, we're going to have to cut this a little short. We're actually using this channel for the mayor's press conference that starts at 1:30. So we're going to have to cut this meeting a little short. But I did want to mention that we are not trying to be the leader in the cost of impact fees. We just wanted to show you those calculated fees and how they stacked up. And we'll be working through with stakeholders. We got a scheduled meeting with the Home Builders Association to get some feedback from them. We're going to talk to our industrial economic development partners and some other stakeholders, and staff will be working with Freeze and Nichols to start formulating some recommendations and things to consider as we work through the policy for our next meeting. And our next meeting, we'll really get into discussions about impacts, what the fee should be, what the impacts are that, should we phase these in? Should there be different costs for different areas, different residential, non-residential? So we'll really get into that discussion at our next meeting. And we'll be sending out some dates to schedule that probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks to have another meeting. So we'll be getting back with you pretty quick to schedule that for a future date. We got about 5 more minutes that we can ask questions for Eddie and Jessica.
Specifically as it regards, any of the commercial industrial impact fees and assessing them. Let's say, we sort of set our fees at a certain level. Is that something, if there's a project potentially coming into town that we think, we're sort of putting together an incentive package for them where impact fees can be waived as part of that? Or is it like, once it's set, there's no ability to, make exceptions on a project by project basis?
Sure. All that comes in the policy side of things, right? And there are waivers. Obviously, if new development builds some infrastructure, they're going to want to get credit for what they put down against their impact fees. So there are those abilities. The only thing I would say is that if there is some specific strategies, that they be listed out of what they are and how impact fees may be reduced if there are certain things that are criteria, if you will, that might be identified. And the reason I say that is Community X in North Texas, their council in some cases were waiving fees for one thing and another thing. You had an NTB that had like about a $4,500 impact fee, and right across the street you had Discount Tire at $12,500 because one got waived and the other didn't. So the note there is, as long as there's some criteria that the leadership is following and how it's applied, but no question, economic strategies and incentives, all that can be bundled in. I'm sure 4A, 4B, those kinds of things are as part of the consideration. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? We're ready. Hopefully not too much math today.
All right, hearing none.
Wait, got a question.
All right.
I'm slow. Is there any way that Clint, you could email us this package of slides or something?
Yes, we can send that out to you today. And then also we'll have this report ready to send out probably sometime early next week. We're still working on the draft, but the report that goes along with this presentation, but we can get this presentation sent out to y'all today.
Thank you.
Peters, is there anything else?
Thanks, Clint. That'd be really helpful. Thank you, Clint.
No, that's all we have, Chair.
All right, then we are adjourned. We will see y'all whenever our next scheduled meeting is scheduled.
Very good. Be safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.